Hello, and welcome to this edition of Technical Insights. I'm Ron Ropiak, and in today's program, we'll take a closer look at VM ESA and see how this operating system is used by a number of different organizations. For one, VM ESA is utilized by Children's Hospital Los Angeles, one of the top pediatric hospitals in the country. Larry Wiedemann visited Children's Hospital to find out how easy the migration was from VM-SP Release 6 to VM ESA 1.1. We'll also hear from Jeff Savitt at Merrill Lynch, an acknowledged expert in the VM user community, to get his general thoughts on VM ESA. And then we'll hear from a director and two systems programmers at ADP, the Automatic Data Processing Corporation. ADP recently migrated to VM ESA 2.1, and we spoke with them to find out about their early experiences. Our host for these two reports will be Joyce Tomaselli, and I'll return afterwards with information on how you can find out more about VM ESA.
Children's Hospital Los Angeles is internationally renowned for a number of programs, including cardiovascular surgery, bone marrow transplant, hematology, and oncology. We first visited Dean Campbell, Vice President and CIO. Dean, what would you say are the main challenges or obstacles facing the hospital today?
Well, clearly the reimbursement environment is of premier importance to all of us. Not only do we have the Hillary Clinton initiatives that we don't yet know very much about, but we have the general environment of moving more to managed care, more to cost containment, more so than ever before.
Dean, where does information services fit in trying to overcome some of these obstacles?
I think that information services provides a unique opportunity in being able to solve some of the problems, make hospitals more competitive, make them more, not just more competitive, but more price efficient, cost efficient. I think that it probably goes without saying that a hospital is really a sort of an information factory. People operate on information here, and I think my goal as CIO here at Children's is to better position the hospital to leverage off of information resources, information technology, to try to gain efficiencies that we've never had before.
What are the applications that your IS department supports, both from an administrative and from a medical perspective?
Administratively, we have the standard set of functions. We have general ledger, accounts payable, payroll, personnel, human resources. We have patient billing and accounts receivable and all of that. We also have a decision support system installed on the IBM platform that hopefully is going to allow us, or not hopefully, it will allow us to better identify what our costs are, be able to know what our product lines are, develop profit and loss statements by product line, understand our business better. So that's kind of the core set of financial and administrative systems. On the patient care side, we have a comprehensive patient care management system implemented on the ES 9000 that allows us from the nursing stations and the ancillary departments to actually chart patient activities, to enter orders, to view results, etc. In addition to that, we have patient appointment scheduling systems, we have operating room scheduling systems, laboratory information system, a pharmacy system, a radiology information system, and a wide variety of other departmental systems.
Jerry, could you give me an overview of the Information Systems Department?
We're currently running on an ES 9000 Model 320 processor. We run VM ESA 1.1.1 operating system that supports approximately 8 to 9 VSE guests currently. Most of the work that we do is done in the VSE systems. We have one VM-based application. It's a decision support system that we're currently running in a second-level VM system because it's will only run in VM-SP. It's not ESA aware yet. We have a 3990 storage director with cache and 2 strings of 3380 DAS. Do we have a string of 3380Ks and a string of 3380Es.
Jerry, you recently migrated from VMSP Release 6 to VM ESA 1.1. Could you elaborate on that?
We were severely storage constrained in the VM SP6 environment. We were supporting at that time about 6 VSE guests and this decision support system, all in a 4381 P14 box multiprocessor. Our biggest problem was storage. It manifested itself in an I/O bottleneck caused by paging, excessive paging. There were periods of time when the paging rate was so high that we felt that it's just about all the operating system was doing was paging. We brought in VM ESA 1.1. The first benefit that we got was, I believe, was the relief from the storage constraint. We purchased a processor with 128 megabytes of real storage, and that pretty much cleared up our storage problem. The I/O bottleneck that would have existed to some degree anyway because of some of the high activity files was lessened to quite a degree by the ESA, or I guess it's called the XA I/O subsystem that allowed us to do true multipathing, where the IOs were sent down both paths in an alternating manner instead of going down the primary first constantly. The second relief we got was when we brought in a 3990 DASD controller with cache in it. I think we've got 32 megs of cache in the DASD controller, and that cache made the difference for the rest of the I/O. We have a couple of databases in the system that are very high usage, and most of that information now stays in cache, and we do very little reads from the disk on those.
How was the migration accomplished?
I was informed about 30 days prior to the deadline that we needed to, we had signed a contract, purchased a new processor that would require our migrating to a VM ESA operating system, and they both needed to be in place by the end of the month. I wasn't real pleased with this. I would have liked to have had more time to plan, but those were the conditions that were laid out for me. IBM supplied us with a place to install the operating system. At that point in time, we were given time at the IBM Customer Support Center in downtown at the LA Grand Office. We planned for the system generation for about a week before we went down to the Customer Center to do it. When we received the tapes from IBM, we took those and the manuals that we knew that we would need down there. It took me working with two SEs, it took me about 10 days to get my system completely genned with all the third-party software, all the additional IBM software, optional products that I was installing. It was about 10 days till I had it completely genned on three packs. We backed those up. We went, at that point it was a matter of waiting until we got the processor in. On the evening that we did the install, I'm trying to remember now exactly how long it did take us. I believe that they cabled that system in there. Once they rolled it in and cabled it up, only in a matter of about 3 hours. And we loaded down the operating system that we had genned at the Customer Center in a matter of hour and a half, 2 hours. We had the system up and running.
Were there any differences between this migration and previous ones that you had done?
Yeah, I think system programmers really hate the word migration simply because you almost always, you know that you're going to have problems, you know that you're going to run overtime, and on whatever you project as being your downtime, that you're going to run into things that you didn't anticipate, and that you're probably going to lose a lot of sleep for at least a week after the migration because you're going to get midnight phone calls about things going wrong that you hadn't thought about. And that didn't occur with this system. In fact, one of the things that I was real happy to see was that the service aids for VM ESA, the SES service, has improved over what we were given in VMSP, and the whole thing is a vast improvement over the old service methods that were available prior to SES. System programmers were used to when they applied service to VM operating systems, having to spend most of their time fixing service execs that would blow up in the middle of the application of service. And when I ran the service, to apply service to ESA 1.1.1, after installing it, it ran from beginning to end with no problems. And that's not something I've seen very often.
Did your end users notice this conversion process?
No. The end users were completely unaware, except that the response time improved dramatically after we came up, and that was about, I think, all that they saw of it.
How important has VM ESA been since your conversion?
Critical. Absolutely critical. Without the extended storage, without the additional storage that we got, the storage relief, in getting the ES9000 processor with the extra storage and the VM ESA operating system to access it, we would probably be at a standstill today.
Jeff, how do you use VM at Merrill Lynch?
The real reason we have VM is to support the actual business where we're actually driving the trading floors, where people do analytical work on VM using models that they've written themselves, and also other applications for info center types of things and doing econometrics, and for applications like doing securities pricing, where we deliver electronically to over 300 clients the current values of their stocks that they've bought and sold during the day, so they can update their holdings electronically, and then at the end of trading, we can send to them the values of their portfolios so they can do things like declare dividends and print them in newspapers and so forth.
Who uses VM at Merrill Lynch?
They range everywhere from clerical staff to people who are managing directors. On the trading desk, you'll see people who move over $30 billion worth of securities in a year.
VM is very scalable. What does this mean to you at Merrill Lynch?
Well, what it means for a lot of companies, Merrill Lynch included, is the ability to choose between centralized and distributed computing based on what the price performance is this year and the needs of an individual application. And we see in Merrill Lynch, we see in other firms throughout the area, that you might have people running on a little 9370 or all the way up to the largest 9000, ES 9000, Model 900 or 980 or something. And you don't have to change a single line of code, you don't have to recompile anything, you don't have to do anything. You can even access the application from large or small machines because of the interoperability between systems. So you can pick the right system for your current needs. You can grow to a larger system or shrink back if you're cutting back an application without having to sacrifice all the code that you may have spent several years developing and the data that may be a very proprietary, very important asset. And if you go across computer lines and you want to go distributed for that for a number of reasons, because it's a very important trend, the other alternatives that are out there in the marketplace mean you basically have to throw away everything you have. So if you've got applications written for one platform, it's very hard to write an application that will stay working on each platform you might want to run the application. With VM and only VM, out of almost anything in the marketplace, you can have the same code, whether it's written in Rex or APL or Fortran or any of the languages or application systems that VM supports, whether it's AS or what have you, and be able to run that on any size machine. And VM remains true to its heritage of being able to run on small hardware as well as large, which it fully exploits, and delivering sub-second response times to thousands of users with relatively small amounts of resource.
What opportunities do you see for VM in the client-server environment?
Well, there are a number of things that work out very naturally with VM, and I think VM is going to be a very good target system for participating in client-server for these reasons. We here are going to be looking at things like workstation data save, which I guess is now DFDSM, for providing centralized backup and recovery, because people are finding out they don't really want to be in the business of having to provide their own backups and restores and offsite vaulting and staffing for making sure these things that are essential actually get done. It turns out to be rather tedious. And you can actually have centralized backup and offsite vaulting so that if you lose a workstation's disk or you lose the workstation altogether because the ceiling caved in, you can actually restore its contents somewhere else. And after the explosion of the World Trade Center, there are more people who are kind of concerned about making sure that they actually can restore their workstation data. In the mainframe line, people have known how to do disaster site stuff and make sure you've got good backups. And this is a leveraging of skills and the existing infrastructure for providing offline media and getting it off-site that has already been around. So products like this are a big help, whether it's that or WLFS VM or some of the other related products, LANRES, for example. The things that we're already doing, and doing very heavily and relying on, are mostly based on TCP/IP. We use IBM's TCP/IP for mainframe, and we have a lot of people doing file transfer using FTP. We have a lot of people using Telnet to log on from workstations. But we have cooperative applications, if you wish to call them that are based on applications on one platform or another, sending files to the other platform through FTP, and possibly sending a mail file saying it's now time for you to do something with it, or using the remote execution facility to say, run this command against the file I just put there. And that's not very high tech, but it sure does work very well, and it's very natural. People do this all the time.
VM ESA release 2.0 and 2.1 have been announced and are shipping now. What items of special interest do you see in these newer releases of VM ESA?
There are two big ticket items that mean a lot to me, and I think to a lot of other people's. One very pragmatic one is the increased facility within the shared file system for 24/7 availability. It used to be that if you wanted to add space to a file pool, this is the big one that always hurt you, if you wanted to add space to a file pool, you had to take the file pool server down, add the mini disk, and then bring it back up again. So you had to take an outage, and it might be 3 or 4 in the afternoon, peak time. When are you going to run out of space? Peak time. When can you not take it down? At peak time. And with VM ESA Release 2, they added the facility for adding space while it's running. And that's like one of the best things that came down in SFS for quite a while. Plus the ability, which I guess has been around since ESA 1.1, for using data spaces. Because then you get the functional power of being in shared file system, and you get away from having to allocate contiguous cylinders, and you can just do with shared file system and get that raw efficiency due to data spaces for data that's mostly read. And I have to say that users love it because they call me up, or they call somebody else who might be an administrator, and they say, could you increase my disk space? And you say, okay, I did it. And they say, I don't have to log off while you move my mini disk? And I said, no, and I don't have to go find a 600-cylinder contiguous extent either, and they love that. The other really important thing to come along in VM ESA is the integration of CMS pipelines into CMS. That is just so important. It's so important to have that high-powered tool be available on every VM system. And with ESA 2.1, a lot of the things that were in the internal version of pipelines are now moved into the product, so everybody can use them. So this means you have this tremendous tool set with incredible rich operators that let you just compress code from hundreds of lines in just a few pipe stages, and you can code the stuff and know that it'll run regardless of whether your system happened to license the PRPQ or what have you. And by adding all the internal features, you get all these wonderful things that even in pipelines you had to think of kind of an indirect way of doing it. Now you just express it very naturally and very directly. So these are just great things.
Tom, as director, what are the main challenges facing you?
ADP currently has 40 data centers that process payroll, and each of them currently runs a mix of VM and VSE. Our major payroll system is run under the VSE operating system. With 40 data centers, it's very difficult for us to get the most current versions of any operating system distributed to all 40 of those locations. So what we try to do is stay as current as possible at the corporate location, sometimes even being beta sites for newer versions of the software, and then try to propagate it from here out to the rest of the regions. In the remote offices, other than Roseland, we have a single application which is VM-based, which is our job submission facility, if you will. Local in Roseland, we use VM for a lot of other things. We have approximately 700 developers here, programmers, that all run in the VM environment, using CMS as their development tool with VSE batch compiles and testing. VM in my environment for the development of new operating systems. Since we have to support all of the flavors of VSE or VM or MVS that run in the field offices, I have an environment here which is a VM ESA system under which I run each of the other operating systems that we support in the field. And in that way we can continue to do development and bring up new versions and test things before we would have to put it into production in a field office. We could not live with the 40 different types of systems we have out there without having VM to provide the flexibility to run all of the operating platforms that we have.
How would you classify your migration to VM ESA?
When VM-ESA was announced in September of 1990, we were not interested in the 1.0 version, but very interested in the 1.1 version because it had 3990 extended function support. It had the features that we needed to get our business running better. To give you a perspective, what we've done is in the ESA environment, we assume that we have, before ESA, a roughly 30% overhead factor for our VSE guests running under VM. When we put ESA in, we dropped that factor down to 10 to 15%. So VM-ESA has bought us back roughly 15% of our processors. If we were to go to an ESA native operating system, be it VSE or MVS, we expect to get back another 10 to 15%. That is just across the board, not assuming that VM is buying me any other benefits, which it does. In going to VM-ESA 1.1, we experienced that, what we expected, which was the 15% drop. We also saw that a significant improvement in processor utilization. It was more smooth. We can drive the processors at 100% and not have to worry about it. We still get the transactions processed. Whereas in the older environment, the 370 environment, we were having trouble when we got up into the above 85% kind of range. We brought up 2.1 and have seen even more performance improvements. We are a high user of the IUCV function, and some of the IUCV function has been restructured such that it performs a little bit better. We've started to play with virtual disks, and they have been a performance improvement for our VSE lock file and label area processing. So we keep looking for VM to give us performance boost in each of the new releases.
What's the VM configuration here at ADP?
We've got 4 VM systems. One, our test system, SysProg 1, where we do all our testing. But we've got a development system where we've got a bunch of CMS application programmers running. And we've got a system we call Roseland, where it has another set of systems, application programmers running their programs. Both of these systems have about 100 VSE guests running, because that's what we are. We're a VSE shop. So they've got QA VSEs, SDS, and system integration. All these are duplications of the field offices. So any of the application programs that are created are run through the system integration, the QA, and stuff like that before they're ever rolled out to the field. So we pretty well use our VM systems pretty heavily. The other VM system we've got is national billing. All the 40 data centers around the country do their billing through Roseland.
You migrated from ESA 1.1 to ESA 2.1. Why?
With all the VSEs that we're running, we thought that the idea of the virtual disk could help us a lot. Most VSE guests that run under VM, they have what they call a lock file, which is because they share DASD. So anytime anybody, one system wants to do something and another system wants to do it, they have to go through the lock file and find out who owns that file. Well, this is on a disk. So you have to access that disk, read it, and send it back to the CPU. If it's all in storage, you eliminate that overhead. So it's, hopefully 30 to 40% faster. That's just my idea, but they say it's going to be a lot faster for us.
How long did the migration take, including your planning time?
I'd say less than 6 weeks. We were very fortunate that our program products were at a level set that we didn't have to worry about ordering new program products.
How much time did it take to actually IPL and get the system up and running?
Probably maybe about 3 weeks. We ran it second level about 3 weeks. The first time when we did SysProg 1, and that was just moving everything over, making sure we had everything. We did it slow. We brought up our second system within 1 week.
When you migrate, do you migrate the control program and CMS all at once?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, doing it second level is no problem. You build your system, second level on a complete different set of DASD. That way, if you have any problem, all you have to do is just IPL off the old address, and you're back.
Any unpleasant surprises?
No.
Any pleasant surprises?
It was VM says was after all the horror stories with release 6, and it wasn't all that much easier in XA 2.1, a little bit easier in 1.1. SES does so much for you now that it's unbelievable. All the way from the installation to the service. You don't have to hardly do much of anything yourself anymore.
How about your end users? Did they notice any differences?
Everybody noticed the speed. Everybody that's called said, is this supposed to be faster? And we said, of course it's supposed to be faster. Well, and they say, well, it is.
So it's noticeable to someone sitting at a terminal.
All the way from the IPL is so much faster that to just running applications, they're faster.
You've become very experienced with migrations. Do you have any advice for others that are also going to migrate?
I think the biggest thing is just to follow the documentation. The documentation this time around is very, very good. You know, there's hardly any errors, and if you follow it to the letter, you won't have any problems.
That'll do it for this edition of System 390 Technical Insights. We hope we've given you useful information. For additional information about VM ESA, stay tuned.